Welcome back to the Mina Kimes Show featuring Lenny, the only NFL podcast. One of the hosts thinks first down should be said in this tone. First down, down. I said down. That's Lenny. I'm Mina Kimes. And joining me today to preview exciting Week 12. It's a backloaded Week 12. Brett Kollmann, what did you think when you looked at the schedule?
It's hard to live up to last week,
Yeah.
right? Where you get a few of the best games of the entire season all at the same weekend. But it's holding its own. Like, there's some stinkers that we're just going to move through as quickly as humanly possible. But there's still some good matchups here and a lot of playoff seeds that are going to be heavily influenced this weekend.
Oh, yes. In the afternoon. And then, I alluded to this with the backload. Sunday night and Monday night are awesome this week. But as always, we are going to talk about all the games. I am going to focus on the home teams. Brett, who, by the way, if you don't already listen to the Bootleg Football Show or watch it on YouTube, you should definitely check that out. And for a few of the games, one of us will just take a few of the aforementioned stinkers, I think. And one of those stinkers is on Thursday night. So we should just start. We're going to go chronologically. Oh, I didn't tell you this, Brett, but we're picking the games as well. Although I keep forgetting to do it with some of these bad games. So if you notice that I forgot, tell me. Steelers, Browns. That's me. So the Browns game last week was so weird, by the way. If you look at the score and then how it actually played out, it was a very, very strange and weird, confusing game. But my focus for this one is actually kind of on the Browns side, but it's in terms of how the Browns defense matches up with Pittsburgh. I wrote Browns defense. Why not mix it up for this game? And I say this about every Steelers game right now with this iteration of the offense, but we know what the Browns defense does. They play the most single high or second most maybe in the NFL. They play a ton of cover one. We also know what Pittsburgh wants to do. Russell Wilson, other than running the football, and they've been running it really well with Najee Harris, Russell Wilson wants to hunt those one-on-one matchups with George Pickens and Mike Williams, George Pickens in particular. What if Jim Schwartz comes out and everyone thinks they're going to do one thing? What if he mixes it up? I'm just throwing this out there. What if they come out and suddenly they're playing, quarters coverage against? I actually think there's an opportunity here for Cleveland to kind of throw a curveball, because I think that would actually, slow down this Steelers offense in a way. They you saw some of that last week against the Ravens, not just because of the coverage structures, but if you can take away those one-on-ones or at least limit them, this passing attack has not been as successful, Brett.
And, when we were going into the game last week against Baltimore, you kind of point out Baltimore's vulnerability against the moon ball, right?
Yeah.
Like, they have a bunch of DBs they gave up the most touchdowns, 20 plus yards down the field outside the numbers of any team. Cleveland is better against it, and Denzel Ward's had a heck of a year. But the one area of the Browns defense that I think Jim Schwartz could definitely do better with is blitzing. Like, they don't blitz a whole lot, and I get it. They have pass rushers that we like, but like, this is a team that if you're looking at all the different down and distance situations, they never cross a 23% blitz rate on any down or distance. That's low by modern NFL standards. Where you look around the league, you got teams that are at like 35, 40, 45. You look at Minnesota, it's like 60% blitzes on like second down. And I kind of feel like this is the week that you really want to exploit a young Steelers offensive line with blitzes. Not that they aren't talented, but like, make them sort it out. Like, make them have to communicate, make them have to pick stuff up. Because if you're just going 4 against 5, like, and you're just leaving your corners out on islands there, like, sure, they've been better against it than Baltimore's DBs, but like, that's George Pickens and Mike Williams out there. Yeah. Like, that kind of tips the scales a little bit. So why don't we just not allow those throws to happen in the first place and try to make a very young interior Steelers offensive line pick it up? They haven't done that this year. I like to see them try.
Yeah, I just feel like, look, the season's over for Cleveland, right? Yeah. But you have opportunities here to pay spoilers. It's a divisional game. It's a night game. If I'm Jim Schwartz, to your point, like, let's change it up a little bit, because I do think that the way they play, which is so rigid, it doesn't play into the Steelers' hands, pardon me, necessarily because they're still talented, as you said, at corner, and they still have this great pass rush. But I think from a game planning perspective, if Pittsburgh goes in with Arthur Smith expecting one thing and they throw a curveball, I could see some issues. I am concerned about them giving up explosives on the ground because the Steelers' run game has really impressed me over the last few weeks. But yeah, I just think I don't have a lot of hope for them on the other side of the ball. Maybe I'm wrong, but I've been so impressed by the Steelers defense. I think for Cleveland to pull off the upset, it would have to happen with them really shutting down the Steelers offense that last week really struggled. It was kind of lost in the
Mhm.
win because the defense was so great and Lamar didn't play well, but Pittsburgh's offense was not good last week. And I'm just, I think I'm still picking Pittsburgh. I assume you are too.
Yeah,
Pittsburgh.
I'd be a fool to pick Cleveland in any game at this
Right.
point, right? Like, are they going to be favored in any game the rest of the season? I don't know if they will be.
Yeah, I don't know about that. I'll get to them in their off season at some point because it is obviously it's a lot. It's very, very tricky. Okay, that's it for that one. Titans Texans is all you. Texans. I
Oh,
don't feel like that. Everyone knows that you are a Texans fan.
I
Dominique and I
am.
talked about the Texans Monday Night Football game. Brett, both of us were pretty underwhelmed by what we saw on offense, even though they obviously destroyed the Dallas Cowboys. So, what say you?
I mean, if you're underwhelmed, just imagine how Texans fans feel,
Mm,
right? Like, I work with the Chargers, but I've been following the Texans since I was a kid, and it, I don't want to say like this was the year because let's be honest, 2011 was actually the year before Albert Hainsworth stepped on Matt Schaub's foot. Like that was the year they were going to win it all. But this year felt like the first realistic shot they had in 13, 14 years to really go on a run. And of course, it's the year that pass protection completely falls apart. Like this is just not a good pass protecting line at all, which is a massive issue. You have CJ Stroud with the second most dropbacks under pressure of anybody in the entire league. And they're going against a Titans defense, which, not to go on too much of a tangent, if there is a silver lining here, Titans defense is not very good at rushing the passer, so it's kind of like
mm.
stoppable force
Yeah,
meets
right.
movable object. Um, there's been kind of a narrative about the Titans defense this year where people look at the overall passing yardage allowed, right? Because they're number one in the NFL. They're like, oh my God, it's a great pass defense. Not really. They're not a good pass defense. They're just historically awful on special teams. So it makes their pass defense look better than it actually is because you just don't have to get as many yards per drive to actually score on them. So the one good thing the Texans have going for them is they can't pass protect, but Tennessee can't pass rush. And you have a very good special teams for Houston going against the worst special teams by a
Mm,
mile in Tennessee. And I have some numbers for you to paint a picture for how bad they are. So Tennessee has punted the sixth most out of any team this year, as you would expect. Their
yeah.
offense is not good. They have the worst average net per punt at only 37.4 yards, which is terrible, and the highest punt return rate by a mile at 66%. So 66% of those punts are getting returned. They have the sixth most in the NFL, and the average punt return against them is 17.3 yards. The average return is 17.3. On kickoffs, they have the worst average starting field position allowed at 33 yards. Meanwhile, the Texans, by the way, average punt return allowed 4.9. So we talk about the Titans
Wow.
defense, pass defense
This is
being number one. You don't have to go very far against them.
sorry, what
Like
was
that's why
4
they're
point
number
what are
one.
the difference there in average punt return allowed between
Texans
these 2 teams?
average punt return allowed 4.9. Tennessee average punt return allowed 17.3. It's literally
That
the
is
best and the
that
worst in
is
the same game.
when we talk about hidden yards, that is insane, by the way. Like,
It's
that
incredible.
is a crazy stat. Yeah, wow. You talked about the Titans pass rush probably not being I mean, famous last words before you play the Texans, but not being one of the better units or rusher groups in the NFL. The Texans pass rush, on the other hand, still very good, even without Will Anderson Jr. Saw that on display against Dallas. Danielle Hunter took over that game at points. I don't think Anderson Jr. is going to be back for this one. Maybe that would be,
He might
um,
be.
yeah, I don't know if they really need him against this Titans offensive line. I'd really just like to see this Texans offense look a little bit more like they did last year. I'm willing to write off that one game of Nico Collins because I think we're like, oh, Nico Collins, he's a full go. He's 100%. He's going to get all the targets. And he came back and it was a little underwhelming. I'm willing to say, well, that was his first week back, maybe a little bit of a slow roll because you'd really like to see that first down play action passing connection between CJ Stroud and him show up again. And that will solve a lot of the Texans' problems, I believe, if it does. I'm picking the Texans in this one. I imagine you are as well.
Yeah. I mean, I know that they're going to make it as painful as possible, but they'll probably win.
Vikings Bears. So we're both talking about this one. This is a big game. The Bears are still in it. They're not out. Obviously the Vikings, it's funny, man. Like I feel like they've just been winning games, but nobody believes in them anymore because of how they've been winning and the way that Darnold has played. They're still a good team, still a really good defense. Still, obviously, you have Justin Jefferson and that group of pass catchers. So I'm focused on the Bears side here. And we talked earlier this week about Caleb Williams. I'm going to put a pin in that and actually talk about the Bears defense. This Vikings offensive line is not protecting the same way they were before Christian Darrisaw got hurt. We have seen Sam Darnold really struggle with pressure, and I think that's leading to some of the bad decisions we're seeing. On the flip side, this Bears pass rush, man, the first 6 weeks of the season, they were second in pass rush when the last 4 weeks dropped to 30th. And Montez Sweat came back. He's been back now for a couple weeks. So look, he also is obviously working his way back from injury. I mean, he's playing, but he's coming off the injury. But my feeling is they cannot pull off this upset unless they can get after Sam Darnold in a way closer to what they looked like. And it was, the pass rush the first few weeks of the season, it was like a lot of contributions from surprising players, right? The defensive tackles, Darrell Taylor from Seattle. And it's just kind of fallen off and they look a little bit more like what we expected. If they can get closer to at least average, I think, because they really didn't do anything against Green Bay last week, then I think they've got a chance in this one.
And it's been kind of a tale of two halves for the Bears pass rush, right? Well, I mean, it's been a tale of two halves for Bears everything this year. And it's just been a roller coaster year. I will say if there is a get right game for the Bears pass rush, it's probably this week, right? Because the post Darrisaw Vikings offensive line, we're talking about an offensive line that has top 10 in terms of true drop back passes, non-screen, non-RPO, non-play action, and bottom 10 in terms of pressure rate allowed. Oof. And when Darnold's under pressure, his turnover worthy play rate skyrockets, right? So you can get him to make mistakes if he's under pressure. And when they're not doing play action passes, he's going to be under pressure a lot.
Yeah.
So the key, I think, is stop the run on first down, get them into second and long, because their play action pass rate craters on second and long. They'll do it a lot on second and medium, second and short. They don't do it on second and long. Get them into true drop back passes and then hope that Darnold tosses you one, right? And then, of course, the Bears offense has to capitalize on that. I will say, if you're looking at the Bears offense last week, they had a little schematic tweak that I think is worth noting. For the audience at home, if you've ever heard of formation into boundary looks, or FIB, where the strength of the offensive formation is into the short side of the field, they did that 30% of the time last week. That's the most I've seen any team do that. And they're third this year in terms of average FIB rate at 18%, which is still way higher than normal. They did it 30%. It's the most they've ever done. The most they've done since when they lit up Carolina back in week 5, when they did it 25% of the time. For context, Ryan Grubb was known as like the FIB king in college football last year at Washington. He only did it 25% of the time. They did it 30. And in Seattle, he's only doing it 12. So I think that they're doing that because Caleb's comfortable with it, because it just kind of manufactures space to the field. And it kind of creates a manufactured ISO outside. I kind of feel like they're going to do that again this week and force Rome to be one-on-one outside and try to toss him some deep balls, because it might be the only way they're going to get to do it.
Was that the case on the back shoulder at the end of the game? I'm trying to remember what that looked like.
I'd have to go back and look. But, if you're trying to get Flores out of all these quarters fire zones, like you go into FIB and say, you're in cover 3 now, bud. Like, deal with it.
I thought Thomas Brown called a good game last week. He was their interim offensive coordinator. And that's a really interesting note about the formation into the boundary. I mean, there was like a few little things here and there he tweaked with. It wasn't otherwise particularly dramatic. And I like, we talked about earlier in the week. I thought he gave not only did he give Caleb some easier answers, and obviously really liked how he used him as a runner, but he found ways to get the receivers involved, not just in ways that suited their skill sets, but I think how do I put this? Kept DJ more interested in the football game, things like that.
Gave him the ball.
Yeah, right. I will say, like, all those screens to Moore, I don't like that approach against this Vikings defense.
Yeah.
Because this is probably one of the best screen defending defenses in the entire NFL. If they try, like, they use them on a sweep, I feel like that gets blown up. So, the way you beat the Vikings, there's a lot of tools that we've seen certain offenses lean on, whether it's, well, certainly having a good run game on for early downs is huge against this team, but that willingness to throw some of those balls down the field when you have the opportunity, tempo, all of those things. I think there's like opportunities here. I'm a little bit nervous to go from, okay, baby steps, this offense looks competent, to, okay, they're ready to face one of the most complicated defenses in football and try to exploit that. But I feel like some of the things we saw last week will translate. I think that connection with Odunze, if they get those one-on-ones, Williams as a runner, both as a design runner and a scrambler, could be big in this one. I'm not super. I don't think it's going to look as good against this defense. I don't know, Brett. What are you thinking?
I think the Bears have an outside shot if they rip off the Lions. And when I say rip off the Lions, they need to go look at what Ben Johnson did basically the last 4 times they played each other. Because Ben Johnson's approach to facing Flores, because he knows there's going to be a bunch of quarters fire zones. Mm-hmm. Most common fire zones in the NFL are going to be 3 deep, 3 under. Vikings do it differently. They play quarters, but still send 5. What that does puts a ton of stress on the linebackers underneath to have to cover a ridiculous amount of space. But they also have to play the run. So what Ben Johnson did is he put Jared Goff under center the vast majority of the time and was running all these hard play action fakes, because you can't cover all that space in a quarters fire zone and play the run. You have to step up. So they were hitting all these crosses to Amon-Ra and Laporta. Like, if the Bears just rip that off and just do under center hard play action fakes, it's going to be there for Kmet. It's going to be there for Keenan.
They did have Caleb under center a bit more last week, by the way, and a couple of the DeAndre Swift explosive runs were from under center. I guess when I said, like, you got to be able to run the ball well on early downs, just haven't seen it consistently from the Chicago team. It looked a little bit better last week. I think getting the quarterback involved will help. But to your point, that's absolutely what's worked for Detroit. And, to the Rams as well. This is an unbeatable defense, and I've certainly sowed cracks as the year has gone on. I'm just not, convinced that the Bears' offense, with its some slight improvements last week, and again, I thought Caleb had a really good game. This is a difficult matchup. I'm going with the Vikings for that reason. However, if Chicago can turn over Sam, as we talked about at the beginning, then I think it gets more competitive. If Darnold looks as discombobulated as he has in recent weeks, to your point, because of pressure, I think that the Bears have a chance.
Yeah, I think there's a path to victory, but I'm too cowardly to say they're going to do it, so I'll go with the Vikings.
Okay, just me on Cowboys Commanders. I wrote, this game could not be more of a get-right game for this Commanders offense, which isn't wrong per se, but obviously they've had some difficult matchups in recent weeks. The rushing attack, has been somewhat limited after looking so dominant early. It's a really fun run game to watch, by the way. I was sitting down and I was thinking, like, okay, like, what are the types of runs that Dallas is vulnerable against? Well, all of them, to be honest. And what does Washington do? But Washington does kind of everything, right, with Cliff Kingsbury. This is a really, really interesting, just in terms of like the personnel that they use. They use all sorts of runs with different guys pulling, different actions involving the quarterback. So they use a lot of eye candy, which Dallas has really struggled with. It would be very shocking to me if this Dallas defense was able to stop Washington on the ground.
The one thing that gives me pause about the Commanders' offense, and this is really more of a general point about them, because the Dallas defense
yeah, right.
Yeah, this defense doesn't count, right? But it's a general point about the Commanders, because there's been all this talk about, okay, Has Washington hit a wall? Has Jaden Daniels hit a wall? Or is Cliff Kingsbury-ing again? And to a degree, yes, but also to a degree, no. I think there is a way to fix it. But if you're looking at the baseline symptoms for why they've taken a step back, it's because they're still doing all the same stuff they did in weeks 1 through 5, right? They still have the second lowest motion rate in the league at 48%, which can be a benefit to a young quarterback that, kind of wants a static picture, because if you do motion, defense is going to change. And if they don't know how to identify that, like, I get it from that standpoint. But when you package a lack of motion with the 6th highest bunch rate in the entire NFL, they use a lot of different bunches. Defenses love when you just have a static bunch, because then they can just call a box check against it. You have 4 DBs playing over 3 receivers. Everybody takes their own corner. They just read the releases and they play it out, right? And you're seeing a trend around the NFL where you still get teams running a lot of bunches, but they're doing motion into it, especially at the snap. They go from a 2x2 into a 3x1, and they make you sort it out
Sean
quickly.
McVay is the king of this.
100%. McDaniel in Miami.
We're going to talk about it when we talk about the Rams Eagles, by the way. Yeah.
Oh, Rams Eagles would be great, by the way. This is awesome. Right. But Commanders don't do that, right? They don't really motion into it. It's just, we are in a bunch, deal with it. And teams are really good at dealing with it now. So they just take away the deep read, they take away the mid-level read, and Jaden's like, guess I'm throwing it short. Yeah. And that's how you end up with a game, against Fangio, where 24 out of 32 passes are within 5 yards of the line of scrimmage. So I think they got to change something, whether it's more motion, less bunches, spread people out, like just make guys have to work, because they're not doing that.
I'm going to do I'm going to try to some football translate or de-football translate that for the layman or something. The Commanders have one good receiver, Terry McLaurin, and because of everything Brett just described, it's easy to defend him. Yes. And you saw that against Philadelphia when he was blanked. Is that like a layman's? And by the way, I think that's something when we talk about the proverbial cliff, so to speak, that this Commanders offense hit. Cliff deserves a ton of credit for how good the offense was, despite the fact that they really only had one receiver you had to worry about. I think that kind of gets, and despite the fact, they played so above the talent level, frankly, on offense. And what happens, though, is if you are not using scheme to get that guy as many targets and as many opportunities as possible, and the defense really only has to worry about him, honestly. Obviously there's more than that. You have to worry about Jaden's legs, a very dominant run game, or whatever. But I'm just saying, if you are, and this is of course something you saw in Arizona, with DeAndre Hopkins, if you are not finding ways to get that connection going, you do hit a wall against good defenses. So I think that's what we're seeing.
They're the exact team that probably should have gone after Deontay Johnson or Mike Williams or somebody at the deadline, right? Like they need something else. And when you have an offense that early on in the season had so much manufactured production, if we're being honest about it, 53% of the dropbacks were either screens, RPOs, or play action. A lot of manufactured production. Once defenses realize that if they just tied that right hand behind your back, you can't fight back with your left, you got nothing else. They're like, go ahead, do anything else. And they just can't right now.
I feel like that could be a bit, by the way. I need a better term than football translator. You say something complicated and I'm like Terry McLaurin, no open. Okay.
This is why he's getting nothing on your fantasy team.
There you go. But it is, I think, a really good point. That said, I imagine we were both picking the Commanders to win this game. Verbal. There's an
okay. Yes. I mean, I don't feel great about it, but sure. Yeah.
Okay. Patriots Dolphins. So I actually have us both talking about this one because I found this game a little bit interesting. The Dolphins are still in contention, right? They're 4-6 now, but the schedule is very easy. After they beat the Rams, my ears perked up a little bit because I was thinking damn, their schedule, they're in the bottom of this AFC playoff picture is pretty ugly. So there's the Chargers and the Broncos are kind of pulling away a little bit with these wins, but the Dolphins aren't out of it. This is obviously a must-win game for them. I also find it interesting because I find Drake May interesting, and now this Patriots team is just infinitely more entertaining to watch. You are talking about the Patriots, Brett, so what would you like to focus on there?
I am really interested to see if Drake May can just sustain drives, because that has been
Yeah.
the key. Honestly, the best defense against the Dolphins offense has been just sustaining drives against the Dolphins defense, because they've been really hot. Like since Tua came back, they're second in EPA per play. They're also second in terms of positive EPA percentage. The problem is their defense can't get off the field. Over the last 4 weeks, their defense in terms of average drive or average plays per drive is the worst in the NFL. So Drake May just needs to get a bunch of 10, 11 play drives going to keep Tua off the field, because this defense is incredibly, and when I say this defense, I mean Miami's defense is incredibly vulnerable against that. Like, just be safe with the ball. Don't turn it over. Like, just give me 4 or 5 yards of play. Just stay on the field, because this Dolphins defense will give that to you. They're not that good right now. And if you can do that, then, okay, Tua gets 9 possessions. We can win if Tua gets 9 possessions. If
Yeah.
Tua gets 11 possessions, you lose.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking at Miami, and I was just trying to I was looking at all the matchups between the Miami offense and the Patriots defense, and it's not cute for for New
No,
England. Like, I think
no.
especially because, by the way, I know Tua's playing really well, I think.
Mm-hmm.
It's been the Dolphins offense has been really interesting to watch. We talked about them a bit after that Monday Night Football game against the Rams, but um it looks very different, frankly, from years past. Not just that there's a few tweaks in terms of their personnel usage. It's a lot more like Jonnu Smith. The fullback's not on the field as much, the types of runs and things like that. But also it's Tua extending plays, which is totally new and really interesting to watch, right? I feel like all the base Dolphin stuff, though, in terms of the quick hitting throws over the middle of the field with all that stuff's going to work against New England. This pack, I mean, and then maybe this is just off of watching them against the Rams, who completely ripped them up with play action. I mean, it's interesting watching him because, again, the week before they played Miami, right? And he was
Mm-hmm.
under a lot of pressure and he didn't play particularly. I thought the Dolphins defense was awesome in that game. You saw against New England, oh, right, when Stafford's kept clean this year, he's an assassin.
He's still
So,
great.
yeah, I
Yeah.
think Tua's going to have time. I think that the Rams went after Jonathan Jones. He's really struggled this year.
Mm-hmm.
Marco Wilson. I feel like there are such very clear opportunities for this Dolphins passing game in this one. So, yeah, I think your point is key, which is if Tua Tagovailoa has the ball more, they're probably going to win.
Yeah.
I really liked watching him. The turnover worthy plays, I think, is what you, as a Patriots fan now, like, you've seen the high end stuff. He's got the goods,
Mm-hmm.
right? He's got the arm.
Oh, yeah.
He's a playmaker. You just want to make sure he takes care of the football, which has been a bit up and down early on. So I think that's going to be key. That's key in this one and everyone. And the point for the Patriots, of course, is the development of Drake May more than anything.
Do you get Justin Herbert vibes from young Drake May? Like, if you take this Drake May and you put it with the 2020 Chargers with Keenan and Mike and Shane Steichen, would they be similar?
What I said before the draft is it's like Justin Herbert's body with Josh Allen's brain.
Yeah. Oh, I can make that throw. Yeah, sure.
Right? I actually think that, for better or worse, is the comp. When he
Yeah.
runs, he does look a lot like Herbert.
Oh yeah, just that lanky, and when he strides out,
Yeah.
it's impressive.
Especially now that we'll get to scrambling Herbert later. But I'm going for Miami to get to 5-6. How about you?
I'm gonna go Miami as well. They're kind of a sneaky 7 seed threat. Like, it's gonna take a lot of work to get there, and they really don't have a margin for error, but they could do it. Like, they could legitimately be a 7 seed by like week 16.
I think they have the Bills one more time, if I remember correctly, or I have to look at this.
I think one more time, yeah.
Yeah, so it's a lot of easy I think, yeah, but yeah, this is all right. Chiefs Panthers.
Okay.
What you got?
I'm not gonna lie, for the sake of Panthers fans, I'm gonna gloss over them a little bit, because they've heard everything. Like, okay, Bryce Young looking better since he got benched. Cool. Like, that's great. We like the young receivers. Like, I'm a big Jalen Coker guy. I like Xavier Leggett. Like, I think they have a future. We love Chuba. We think Brooks is going to be great. Like, there's a young quarterback that's had a bounce back, and there's weapons we like. Offensive line is completely fallen off a cliff. like completely. First month of the season, they were the best pass protecting line in football. In the past month, they've given up a 45% pressure rate, and they've been bottom 3. So I kind of worry about that for Bryce's sake, because we've seen Bryce under pressure before, and it hasn't been good. That being said, kind of a sneaky problem for the Chiefs this year, and they've had some well-established problems. CB2, massive issue. Offensive tackles can't pass protect. Third worst in the entire NFL in terms of their offensive tackles giving up pressure rate. But the real sneaky issue that kind of plays into the Panthers' favor here is Chris Jones has taken less than half of his snaps this year, about 44%, inside.
Yeah.
He's taken the majority of his snaps outside. Why is that? Especially on third down. Why are 80% of his third down snaps?
And they got nothing else.
They got nothing else.
When does Charles Omenihu come back? I meant to look this up the other day, but I didn't care.
Oh man, they need him. Because George Karlaftis is fine, but we're talking about a 12% pressure rate here.
Andy Reid,
that's
4 hours ago.
What you want.
We'll see if Omenihu can return this week. We'll say you caught a glimpse of Josh Uche last week, and he looked good. He just didn't play much. So
I think he's had like 20 to 30 snaps in like the whole stretch that he's been there. But
I feel like they can get him involved more. But yeah, it's not great.
It's why they traded for him, right? Because they just, if you look at all of their edge rushers, Chris Jones is literally their best edge rusher, and he's 310 pounds. Karlaftis is fine. He's solid in that area, but
it's been underwhelming this year.
The sack numbers, I think, don't. If you look at the pressure rate numbers, that's I think more realistic, right? He's producing at about half the level of a top end edge rusher in terms of pressure rates, and so they literally have to put Chris out there, or they're just not going to get anything, and that's a problem. Like when they get to January, that is going to be a huge issue, because it's very much like Cincy, where it's Trey Hendrickson versus the world. KC's the same way, and somehow nobody's talking about that.
Okay, without looking, you might have this in front of you. What do you think the line is for this game? Don't look.
Oh, God. It's going to be more than 10. I'm going to say 12 and a half.
11. That's lower than I would have guessed. I mean, it's in Carolina, but still.
I still would take KC on that, just because, like,
over the
they're going to be so pissed that they lost to Buffalo.
That's the other thing. I know, right? It's like, oh. If Panthers somehow pulled this off, which they won't, though, it would be literally the funniest thing in the entire NFL.
Oh, if the Panthers pull this off, you guys are going to have a really fun NFL Live, because alarm bells are going to be going off.
All right, Lions Colts. Before the break, this is a game we're both going to talk about. This is an interesting game because coming off of a very good Anthony Richardson game, Dominique and I talked about it. We were so encouraged by what we saw. I'm going to focus on that side of the ball. So first, I want to say something about the Lions defense. I think that what they have done since losing Aiden Hutchinson is so impressive, and I probably should have talked about it more. They lost statistically the best pass rusher in the NFL by many metrics to that point in the season. And since then, since week 7, so they lost in week 6, second in EPA per play, third in success rate. And they played good teams. They are getting after the quarterback. They're playing great coverage on the back end. Aaron Glenn, to me, should be in that same breath as when we talk about Ben Johnson as a head coaching candidate, because what he has done turning around this unit and then overcoming the loss of their best player is phenomenal work.
Mm-hmm.
This game, I wrote for the Colts because who I'm focused on here. You have to prepare Anthony Richardson for the blitz. I think Aaron Glenn is going to blitz the absolute living hell out of this kid. I would do it. Anthony Richardson has been bad against the blitz. The one thing that jumps out to me, I pulled this because I just felt it to be true, and holy crap. Versus the blitz, Brett, he has a 3.08 second time to throw. Versus, not just generally, versus the blitz. That's 36 amongst quarterbacks in the NFL. So obviously some of that is skewed by him extending and escaping and trying to make plays. You'll see athletic. It's insane. It is not right. So,
That's wow. Okay.
yeah. So last week we saw Anthony improve in a lot of areas. Shane Steichen, this is you must give him answers, prepare him. This whole week is just you got to be able to beat the blitz, and you cannot hold on to the football that way.
I think Steichen had a great game last week in terms of okay, we're calling something earlier on in the game so that we can see how they react and set something up later on in the game. And I think AR showed growth in the sense that he was receptive to that coaching in the middle of the game. Uh, give you a quick example. He had 3 drops last week. His numbers probably could have been a lot better than they actually were, but he had a few drops. And I was going through those drops because I wanted to see what happened. And I noticed that there was a play call on one of those drops that looked very similar to the Alec Pierce bomb at the end of the game. And I was like, was that Alec Pierce bomb set up by an earlier play? So I went back and watched. And early in the fourth quarter, I'll be darned, they called wing slot. So you had a tight end on the line of scrimmage and then slot receiver to the right and Alec Pierce out wide to the right. And the Jets play a coverage, again, for the people at home. So we don't need to do translator this time. They play quarter, half. So it's quarters on one side, cover 2 on the other. They played cover 2 to the side where the slot receiver was. So you have Sauce Gardner playing the flat. So he kind of just let Alec Pierce go. And the safety that was supposed to be over the top the first time they called this was kind of got a little bit greedy against the run, and he didn't expand out quick enough. So Pierce was just running. AR didn't see it. He threw a ball over the middle, got dropped. They came back to it again later in the fourth quarter. Same formation, same route concept on that side. Safety did the exact same thing. They got the same coverage, and AR immediately saw it, fired the bomb to Pierce. That set up the game-winning touchdown. That sequence to me showed like, okay, there's growth here. It's, hey, Steichen called something. He didn't see it the first time. He looked for it the second time when he got another opportunity, and he fired it. Huge play, game 1, right? I think there is potential for Anthony Richardson to do damage in this game, but if Aaron Glenn doesn't give him the same call twice and he makes him have to see everything for the first time for 30 throws in this game, I think it get a little bit hairy for him, because I think Anthony Richardson, as young as he is and inexperienced as he is, he might need to see a couple things twice for him to really punish it.
Do you think that there'll be any reticence on the part of the Lions to play as much man coverage with the threat of Anthony taking off on them? And it does feel like, by the way, if the Colts are to pull this off, Anthony's going to have to take off for, 60 plus yards, which he's capable of, certainly.
I would be worried about playing that much man against AR, but at the same time, if anybody could get away with it, it's probably Detroit, right? Because they have a whole bunch of DBs that fly around and tackle super well. I mean, this game is tailor made for Brian Branch to have like just a ridiculous all time kind of game, right?
Mm.
Like this is the exact kind of offense he loves playing against. I'm sure there's going to be an interesting cat and mouse where Steichen's going to try some stuff in the first half just to see how they react, and then
Yeah.
he's going to show it again to see if they do it again. But if I was Aaron Glenn, it's like my call sheet is super big today because I just want AR looking at something new on every single play, because I think that's gonna confuse him a little bit.
Yeah. I think that to go back to sort of him scrambling against man, like the rush for Detroit, um, a 4-man rush with man behind it, like if I'm Shane Steichen, I'm saying, "Hey man, be the best athlete on the field today," right? Like, so I think
Mhm.
part of the blitz also will be constraining him, frankly, and taking away rush lates is going to be really important. Is there something you wanted to hit on Detroit separate from that?
I'm just so impressed with Ben Johnson in terms of how he sequences play calls and how he strings everything together. And even when they're up, which is a lot,
Yeah.
like he empties everything every single week. He's like, I put it in the sheet, we're going to it. It's like, I don't care if we're up by 30 points. Like I have this on the sheet for a reason. We're gonna go with it. And every single call is tied into a call that they already had. Like just the way that he sets traps for defenses of like, I know that you're going to do this if you see this look, so we're going to punish you for it. Like he is just unreal. And as far as like game planning offensive coordinators go, Ben Johnson's up there with McVay. He's up there with Andy. Like he's just incredible. And boy, I really hope that he goes to a stable franchise for his first head coach opportunity because I think he could be a McVay type.
Yeah, I mean, he is. I know I said Aaron Glenn's up there with him, but I think Ben Johnson is pretty clearly far and away the number one draft pick for all of these teams, and we're going to start talking about it before the season ends, I imagine, once more jobs open up. So I honestly, Ben Johnson versus Gus Bradley, yeah,
Yeah. Go ahead. Call cover
uh,
3 again, Gus. Call cover 3. Yeah.
we're both on Detroit, I imagine, but I would
Oh,
be
yeah.
cool to see. I would love to see Richardson really lean into his athleticism in this one, and um, just continue building on what we saw last week because I was really impressed by his performance. The Jets are bad. They are obviously bad on defense and they're melting down, but I think there was a lot to like. And I loved your point about the whole shot to Pierce. I didn't notice that early in the game that was set up that way. It's a great throw. Great throw. Okay, we're gonna take a break, come back, and we're gonna get to those aforementioned exciting night games. Why should you bet with Caesars Sportsbook? 2 words, Caesars Rewards. Every bet brings you closer to the types of benefits only Caesars can offer: hotel stays, VIP experiences, sports and concert tickets, and more. It's not just an app, it's an empire. All right, we are back, and I'm going to go first with Bucks Giants. I handed this one to myself. I like the Bucks. I want them to be in this thing. The Bucks are 4-6. The Falcons are 6-5, 6-5, and they have a couple games up on Tampa. Obviously, they won. They beat the Falcons.
Mhm.
They beat the Bucks, and I like the Falcons too. But the Bucks. It's funny for all the talk about how like the Bengals are so much better than their record. Brett, I really believe the Bucks are so much better than their
Oh my god,
record.
yeah.
And by the way, when you look at their schedule, you got the Giants, Panthers, and Raiders. So getting, up in the standings is definitely possible. Then you have the Chargers, which is a big game, but then you're wrapping with the Cowboys, Panthers, and Saints. So second half of the schedule for Tampa here, not second half, but this very winnable. Anyways, against New York, I think this Bucks run game, which has been so improved, and I really like watching Bucky Irving. I think they're gonna have a lot of success against the Giants' run defense. That's just really, really bad. The other thing that I wanted to highlight in this one that I believe to be a pretty big mismatch, and one of the reasons why I do think this Bucks offense has a pretty good day. The Bucks are one of the best screen teams in the entire NFL with Liam Cohen.
Mhm.
It's been really fun to watch. They're second in EPA per play on screens, only behind Detroit, with a downset conversion rate of 95%, which is crazy. The Giants cannot defend screens. They are dead last in success rate against screens, 29th in EPA per play. So I don't think Tampa has to do a lot on offense here. I think that their style of football right now is actually a very good matchup with New York.
The key, especially with using the screen game, is not going through Dexter Lawrence. So call as many screens as you want, right?
You
Because
just did
Graham
the
Barton,
football translator for me, which is you're like, it's really about avoiding the one player you have to avoid, Dexter
it's like,
Lawrence. Yeah.
hey, there's Thanos in the middle of this defense. Like, let's just completely avoid him, right? Let's attack the edges. And Graham Barton, God bless him, he's a
Good
rookie,
player.
good player, but
Oh yeah, Dexter
like
Lawrence. Sorry.
he ain't ready for Dexter. Like he's a first rounder. I think he's
Yeah.
going to be a very good center in this league for a long time. He has had some issues in pass protection because again he's going against some grown men in the NFC, and Dexter Lawrence is the grownest of the grown men. So not relying on a rookie to block Dexter Lawrence in the true drop back pass game would be ideal. Call as many screens as you want until they just do something to stop it. And at the same time, call more 6 and 7 man pass protections because wherever Dexter is, have the guard help out. Like I'm willing to sacrifice a route down the field in order to make sure that Baker doesn't die. So if I'm Tampa, I'm doing that. I am constructing my entire game plan to not have Lawrence wreck the entire game.
I should also note Mike Evans is playing in this game. So
Mhm.
for all I'm talking about, like run the ball on screens, deep balls are back on the menu as well for It's a sentence I probably shouldn't say, but Mike Evans is going to be playing, and that's a really good thing. How about that schedule though? Like this is not over, Tampa. This is not over, and I hope it's not because I don't know. I've got like a really soft spot for this team this year. I just think the way they played the Chiefs and they've been so good against good teams, and I think that's impressed me a lot. Okay, Broncos Raiders is just you. Oh, I'm sorry.
So
I'm on Tampa. If it's not obvious.
I would say
Tommy DeVito.
it's just I'm so worried because that defensive line is so good at getting pressure. But I'll go Tampa as well, just because the difference in quarterback is that apparent. But if there is a reason why the Giants win this game, it's going to be like the same way they beat Seattle, right? They get 7 sacks and win on special teams. But overall, I'm going to go with Tampa. And honestly, Tampa, if you look at all the 1-score games that they could have won and didn't, like this could be like an 8-2 team right now, and they're just not.
Dang. All right, Denver, Vegas.
So I want to talk about Bo Nix a little bit.
That's what I figured.
He's been better. He's been a lot better over the last month or so, right? And I think all of the praise that is heaped on him is absolutely warranted. You know, in the last game, he had a 90% adjusted completion percentage, 318 yards, 9.3 yards per attempt, 4 touchdowns, no picks, almost a 145 rating. Insane, right? Falcons pass rush is the worst in the NFL.
Horrible.
By like
horrible.
wide margin. Ridiculously bad. If only they took Jared Verse. Maybe they wouldn't be this bad, but they didn't. And at the same time, Bo Nix, his average depth of target in that game was 3.8. So again, I'm not saying that Bo Nix is not working. He's clearly working. He's improved. His accuracy has improved. But like, let's just calm down a little bit.
It ain't going to happen this week because they're playing the Raiders. Maybe.
People are throwing out like offensive rookie of the year right now because Jaden stumbled. And I'm like,
all right. Well, I thought about this when I started seeing the offensive rookie of the year stuff, and I pulled up their schedule. So the Raiders, last time they played, they pressured him twice.
Oh, is that not good?
So the other thing is, I talked about this last week ahead of the Atlanta game. The Broncos offensive line is playing out of their minds right now, and I think that's kind of
their pressure rate allowed at the tackle position is like 8%. Like they're the best pass protecting tackle duo in the NFL.
And I think Bo Nix's athleticism certainly is helping in some ways, but they've got the Raiders, the Browns. That's an interesting one because they can get pressure, but also I think a good play caller like Sean Payton can find ways to scheme around them. The Colts, Chargers, that's the one. That's going to be a big one. The Bengals, no. Then the Chiefs at the end of the year. The Chargers game is the one where I think either the Bo Nix hype train stays on track or if it might go off the rails. That's the one I'm watching because that defense is legit.
I think the Broncos are going to make the playoffs, and I know Broncos fans are going to be upset by me tempering expectations about Bo. I'm adding context, right? Just same way I added context for Jaden in the first half of the season where I was like, hey, man, if half your throws are manufactured, like it's going to be a thing. So I still think the Broncos are going to make the playoffs. It's a very good football team. I'm throwing the record out. I would love to see Bo throw down the field a little bit more because right now they're getting by not having to, and I want to see what happens when they have to, right? When you go against Jesse Minter's defense and you have to throw it down the field.
Yeah.
Can you do that?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, like the seam ball last week was really cool. That was a really good throw, but you're right. Mm-hmm. It's a volume. It's not a lot. So, and there's going to be moments where he has to do it. And again, as we were talking about with Richardson and Williams, success as a young quarterback to me is about, can you execute what you're being asked to do? And right now he's been operating this offense. And I think this week that'll continue because I suspect the Broncos win this one.
I think they're going to win it as well. And I'm happy for them because it's the third youngest team in the NFL, and they're learning how to win. And that's a hard thing to do for a
Yeah.
young team, is to learn how to win. They kind of remind me of last year's Packers, right?
Yeah.
Where they're figuring it out. They got a lot of youth. They'll win a wild card game. They get to the division round, and their youth gets the best of them. But I think Broncos fans would take that at this point.
Cardinals, the last 4 games, unless I don't think I missed anything. Kirsten, let me know if I did. But the Cardinals, Seahawks, Niners, Packers, Eagles, Rams, Ravens, Chargers. Yo, these are some games. I wanted to leave a little bit room, so I want to focus on these. So Cardinals, Seahawks, NFC West is wide open right now. This is a big, big game. I am on the Seattle side. You're on the Arizona side. So what I wrote is the improvement we have seen in the last 2 weeks on defense for real? Against the Rams and the Niners, I think Seattle played 2 very good games on defense. There have been subtle tweaks schematically, bigger differences in personnel. They've completely changed the linebacker group midseason. Just Mike McDonald went full who's the kid in Toy Story? Andy, I don't want to play with you anymore to their own linebackers. The trade for Ernest Jones, who I think has been very good for them. Tyrese Knight was either undrafted or like 7th round or something is starting. So that this is good. This is what you wanted. This is why you went out and you got Mike McDonald, is the ability to play the offenses, frankly, in your own division that have been just destroying Seattle in recent years. Arizona offense, however, is a very unique animal. And I do worry a lot about this matchup. We know what they want to do. They want to get tight ends on the field, run the ball, play action out of it. So I want to focus on the play action side, because the Seahawks defense really, really struggled against play action this year. Without looking, I assume they're either still dead last or bottom 3 in EPA per play against play action. So the funny thing about the Niners is they don't really use play action anymore. And they, for some reason, didn't in this game, which I was delighted by as a Seahawks fan. Cardinals love it. They use it at one of the highest rates in football. They're extremely good at it. They love attacking downfield off of it. And I think that either has a potential to be, once again, a fatal flaw for the Seahawks defense, or if these act changes are actually real, there's an opportunity here to continue building on what you have the last couple of weeks.
And there's a little bit of you mentioned last 2 weeks defensive improvement. There's been a little bit of a schematic tweak by Mike McDonald over these last 2 weeks, right? Because if you're going through the last month and a half, they're 22nd in pressure rate in the NFL. And then if you look at the last 2 games, they're 8th in pressure rate. And so I was wondering, okay, I mean, they got a bunch of their defensive linemen back, starting with the Atlanta game. I was like, is it just personnel? And then I looked at the blitz rates, and I was like, oh, he started blitzing again.
Yeah.
In the last 2 weeks, his blitz rate went from 21% to 30%.
And they are working. Sorry.
They are working really, really well.
Yeah.
And he would, boy, he had Brock in a blender on a couple of those where there was no way out. Like absolutely no way out.
Some really demented stuff too. Like guys dropping guys. I mean, the stuff he was known for in Baltimore. Yeah, really, really good.
Peak Ravens blitzes where you're like, oh my God, you stayed up till 4 a.m. Like just figuring this out. And the way Mike McDonald crafts game plans, right? And I've watched a couple clinics that he and Jesse Minner, who both came from that system, have done. Like they chart offenses very meticulously, and they look at run pass rates based on down and distance, especially second and third down. It's like, okay, what's the run pass rate on third and long versus third and medium versus third and short? What are they doing? What types of runs are they doing with the tight end on the line of scrimmage versus off the line of scrimmage? And they chart that so meticulously so that they know what blitzes to call, because they want to figure out exactly what all your protections are based on down and distance. And boy, he had Kyle Shanahan dialed. Like he had him, and it felt like there was no way out for Brock. Like every single third down, and they had so many third downs in like 3rd and 10.
Yes.
It
was scrambles or tight window throws to Juwan Jennings. That was it. They were living and dying by those 2 things in that game.
Yeah. I felt so bad for him. And obviously the Niners offensive line is not as good at pass protection as the Cardinals. Fun fact, by the way, over the last month and a half, in terms of true drop back passes, Cardinals best pass protecting offensive line in the NFL.
It's been that
And they have highest explosive run rate too.
they're
So
good.
like offensive line's
Yeah,
cooking.
they are. They're really good. Paris Johnson play.
I really don't know who's going to win this game because it's such a fascinating matchup, and I feel like these two teams have changed a lot over the
Yeah.
last month. If you had to twist my arm, I'd say Cardinals just because I feel like they're
Well,
more consistent. But God, Seattle's coming.
so I think for Seattle, the reason I have a lot more hope about the offense than the defense in this one. The thing with the defense is that, like, for all of our talk about, the blitzes and how are they defending play action, Cardinals could just get downhill and just stop it, like, just cram right
Yeah.
down the throats. Like, come on. Especially, I mean, I don't think the Seattle has the personnel right now to match those multiple tight end looks with base at a very high rate in this game. And if they come out, I mean, I love Devon Witherspoon more than people in my extended family, but and I know he plays like 5 times his size. He might be like legitimately the best run defending nickel in the entire NFL up with Taron Johnson, but this is a tough matchup. However,
Trey McBride's a big boy.
yeah,
Like
Trey
that's
McBride is
hard.
about 5 times his size. However, Brett, the Seahawks, we all know that their Achilles heel is pressure. Obviously, the offensive line got back Abe Lucas last week. Center played decently well. Olu. Cardinals can't get after anyone. Like that pass
Mhm.
rush, famous last words, right? But it's not a good pass rush. So I do think that the Seahawks offense, there's an opportunity here to move the ball that they have in the games where Geno's actually in his rare moments kept clean. So this is close for me as well. I don't know. I might lead Seahawks in this. I don't know. I don't want to. I'll probably pick
I
Cardinals as an emotional hedge.
I was gonna say then you're happy no matter what, right?
They're going to be able to run the ball in Seattle. Who am I kidding? So I'll go Cardinals, but
I think there's two possibilities for this game. It's either 13-11 or it's 35-34 and
yeah,
nowhere in between.
I totally agree. Some of the most disgusting games of the years have been Seahawks Cardinals. So okay, okay, Niners Packers. This is playoff implications galore in this one, especially after what happened with San Francisco last week, losing to Seattle. A rematch from the playoffs. The Packers had them, and they lost. Jordan Love, horrible interception at the end of the game. You're on San Francisco's side. I want to hear what you think because, yeah, the last week was concerning to me.
And I think it's one of those games that really exposed how much they needed Brandon Ayuk to be healthy and
Yeah,
also Brandon Ayuk to beat Brandon Ayuk. Obviously, there was the slow start because of the holdout and everything like that. Debo's not a number one, and Juwan is awesome, but like they were holding together the entire passing game with Juwan and Debo. A, because Debo has different skill set, and B, Debo's also had injury issues this year as well. He's not himself, and this is an offense that has always thrived when it's had like a true reliable X receiver that can just get open. And right now they don't have that. Again, Juwan is great, but if you look at what Brandon Ayuk did for them last year, even Juwan is not that, right? And when you package that with an offensive line that just continues to be an issue, if we're not looking at Trent and we're not looking at Pooney, like the other three guys are not carrying their weight. They struggle with blitz pickups. They struggle with just winning one-on-ones. Man, there's just a lot wrong with this 49ers offense. And it's not necessarily something Kyle Shanahan can fix right now. It's not necessarily something that Brock can fix right now. They need more dudes.
yeah.
Like they need more offensive linemen. They need to not be in a situation where we have to rely on Juwan and Ricky Pearsall to carry the passing game and like a 31-year-old George Kittle who's also banged up in his own right. Like they just need more dudes and they don't have dudes.
Brock had a 25% tight window throw rate against the Seahawks, which is that would be the highest in the NFL if it was over the course of a season. As you can imagine, last year it was very, very far from. I think probably half that. Honestly, he had amongst the lowest tight window throw rates in the league last season. The level of difficulty dial has been turned up so much for him, and I think he's played pretty well, honestly, all things considered. but you really have seen how the fact that guys were always WAO last wide open last year in the offense wasn't just that Kyle Shanahan is a scheme lord. It's that when your defense asked to cover 5
Mm-hmm.
monsters at the same time, somebody's going to be open, right? But now you're only having to you're not and then they didn't have Kittle against the Seahawks, which was massive, massive in that game. So the one thing I think that's working for San Francisco is I am not a huge believer in this Packers pass rush, frankly.
Yeah.
I think that showed up against Chicago. And so I do think that there will be opportunities in the passing game for them. On the flip side, dude, I love this Green Bay run game. That was just watching them against the Bears. I think that they might have outside of the Lions, funny that they're in the division. Outside of the Lions, I think they have the most aesthetically pleasing rushing attack in football to me right now. And they're third in run DVOA. Doesn't matter who's running. I mean, Jacobs has certainly been a good pickup for them, but I thought Wilson had some really nice runs.
Mm-hmm.
That split flow run game with Kraft coming across, I think that's going to be such a problem for the San Francisco defensive line that is just not good against the run. The other thing I want to highlight in this as a possibility, and I'm highlighting this because I did it last week. I had it in my notes. I wrote, wow, San Francisco really can't stop quarterback scrambles, right? They're giving up 1.5 EPA per play, which is the worst in the NFL. It's like insane. I know that's
Whoa.
insane. It's an insane number.
What?
So I had that in my notes last week, and I'm like, you know what? It's Geno Smith. Like, why am I don't need to focus on that as far as the matchup. Flash forward to the end of the damn football game, and Geno Smith, 2 massive scrambles, including the one to win the game. And so I so regretted not highlighting that last week. Jordan Love's the better runner, but also if I have Matt LaFleur, maybe a little Malik Willis near the goal line because this defense
Especially in the red zone,
cannot stop it and they might not have Nick Bosa in this one either.
And even if they do have Bosa, which again, we're recording this on Wednesday, so we don't know.
Yeah.
You talk about the split flow run game. Like I would run it where it's like tight ends, just aim for his hip. Like let's really make it hurt, right? Because Bosa's already really, really banged up. And if he has to get up every single play after taking a block to his thigh, which is exactly where you take it on those run games, it's like we are hitting you in the hip and rolling down. That's how those blocks are executed. It's going to hurt even more and it's going to slow him down. Like and I'm not saying like, oh, go out and injure Nick Bosa. I'm just saying you call the play as it's designed.
He'll be reluctant, like less. Yeah. I mean, Kraft, dude, there was a split flow run against Chicago where he honestly looked like that meme of Nelson, or is it Martin who flies through the window it's Martin flying through the window. That's what Tucker Kraft looked like, just like I forgot who. It was at Montez Sweat, I think, actually, just taking him out. It was so funny. It's a really, don't you love watching this Packers rushing attack? That's so good.
Oh, the Titans game early in the season when it was Malik. I mean, they ran it like 52 times.
Wishbone.
And they got the receivers involved. Like there was some diabolical stuff.
Their skill players can block too, which doesn't get
oh my god. They're so dynamic. I think the only way the Packers lose this game, and this is a fun little stat. The only way the Packers lose this game is if Jordan Love throws a pick. And it's not because or multiple picks, I should say. And it's not because I don't think Jordan Love is good. And it's not because I don't think the Packers defense is good. Jordan Love is good and the Packers defense is good. It's just Jordan makes the Packers defense their job really, really hard when he throws a pick because he's done it so often. He's got 11 this year. 2 of them are pick sixes. He does it so often and he gives them such bad field position when he does it. Fun fact, Packers defense has the highest scoring drive percentage allowed after interceptions in the entire NFL this year. And 55 points they've given up off turnovers, if you include the pick six. That's a third, more than a third even, of their entire total points allowed the entire year. Wow. So, like, turnovers are what hurt them, not offensively, defensively.
That's interesting.
Like, they're top 10 in terms of scoring drive percentage allowed if you take out all the drives that start Any other way that isn't a pick or a fumble. If you just normal defensive drives, great defense. If the ball is turned over and it's a short field, for whatever reason they crumble. So like just don't throw a pick, Jordan, and your defense is going to play well. That's all I ask. But if they give them those extra possessions, it could get a little hairy.
I'm picking Green Bay. I don't actually. I know our tone of this conversation has probably sounded, I think, more pro Packers than I actually feel. No, Bosa is big if he doesn't play. But if he does play and he's hurt, it's still, I mean, because he thought he was going to play for Seattle and then he went out during the game. That concerns me.
I mean, if I'm the Niners, I feel a lot of pressure to play Bosa because their season's kind of on the line.
Yeah.
But at the same time, if he goes out there and they run it right at him, which we know LaFleur would love to do, like, you might lose him for even longer. So I would feel pressure to sit him for that reason. But also at the same time, it's like we're trying to make the playoffs. Like, I don't know. I don't know what they do. Either way, I pick the Packers, though.
You know this game means a lot to Matt LaFleur, too, by the way. I mean, those guys have, like, the rivalry going, and the last year it was, yeah. All right. Oh, God. Eagles-Rams. Whew. Sunday night. This is a great game. You're on the Eagles side of this, or you're talking. Sorry, somebody told me not to say you're on because it sounds like I'm saying you're betting on the Eagles. You are discussing the Eagles. What are you focused on here?
So, would it surprise you to know this is the first time Sean McVay has coached against Vic Fangio since that?
I wrote down McVay versus Fangio rematch 6-1 Super Bowl. What you got? This is what I want to talk about too.
You and I have the same notes.
I cannot wait for this rematch because, okay, to remind folks who have forgotten, the year that the Rams offense looked absolutely, 2018, right? Absolutely unstoppable, the Super Bowl. And then Bill Belichick put together this like master game plan to shut them down. It was 13-3, right? The boring game. The game plan was first instituted earlier in the season by Vic Fangio's Chicago Bears defense. And they lost to them, and everybody was like, whatever, it doesn't matter. And then it resurfaced in the Super Bowl, and then many, many, many think pieces and podcasts, I'm sure that both of us were on, discussed this. It was a huge moment in football nerddom. And I saw this on the schedule, and especially after last week's performance of the Eagles defense, I was thinking, like, well, I'm sure they've played since then. Who, baby?
I checked last night, and I was like, oh my God, no, this is the first time.
I am so hyped for this, Brett. I am so hyped for this. Okay, you go ahead. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
So again, to be as simple as possible in terms of what Vic Fangio did, they played base personnel against 11. So the Bears played base personnel against the Rams having 3 receivers on the field in that 2018 game, which sounds insane because you're like, oh, that surely must mean that there's a matchup with a receiver against a linebacker somewhere on the field. Not necessarily, because they didn't play man coverage. They just played quarters. They put an umbrella over the top of everything, and then they played what's called a tilt front, which is 6 guys on the line of scrimmage, 1 linebacker on the second level. Why did they do that? Because the Rams, back then, were a very wide zone heavy team with Todd Gurley. So they wanted to stretch everything out east to west, get everybody moving in one direction, cut it back, right? Well, if you have 6 guys in the line of scrimmage, everybody's penetrating, it forces a cutback earlier than the play can develop. So Todd got nothing. And then all of a sudden you end up in 2nd and 9 against it was Gurley, yeah.
Yeah, sorry, just reminding anyone who was like, Todd. Yeah, Todd Gurley. Yeah, sorry.
Todd Gurley.
Keep going, yeah.
And so all of a sudden you get to a 2nd and 9, and you're going against a secondary that is Kyle Fuller and Pritzu Mukamara and Prime Eddie Jackson, and like you're trying to beat them deep, and you're trying to call these crossing routes, and they're cutting it, and you got nothing. So they crushed them, right? And that deeply affected McVay because it didn't just happen once. Like he said, it happened twice. Like Belichick just completely ripped it off in the Super Bowl, did the same thing, and beat him. And over time, since that game, you've seen McVay adjust his offense to be almost unrecognizable from that 2018 iteration. They don't call wide zone anymore. Their offensive line got way bigger and stronger. They're like 320 average on the offensive line. And they call duo. Like they're a duo-based run game in this modern era, because I think that game scarred McVay so much, because then in the next season in 2019, people did it to him again. He's like, I guess I can't call wide zone anymore. And so you're seeing this this completely new
Mhm.
iteration of McVay's offense when he brought in a whole bunch of guys from the Patriots to readjust how their run game works. Now they still use receivers as quasi fullbacks because he just loves doing that, but their types of runs are totally different, and their types of routes, especially against these Vic Fangio tree defenses, totally different. They don't call the crossing route stuff anymore. It's a lot more vertical, and they basically turn everything into a one-on-one down the field because it doesn't matter if it's man or zone. 35 yards down the field, everything's man to man. And so, like, McVay has spent the last more than a half decade thinking
Basically
about that
fighting
game,
this. Yeah. There's
adjusting to that game.
there's a by the way, I want a quick programming note. Jordan Rigg, who does an amazing job covering the Rams, did an entire podcast, a lot of which is about everything Brett just described. I was interviewed for this show podcast about this moment, the subsequent Rams, the change, everything McVay went through. It's called The Play Callers. You guys should go check it out. If what he said fascinates you and that back and forth, it was really really fun to talk to her about it. So, anyways, the point is the lore for this game for
Oh,
dorks is rich. It is rich. Sorry.
this is the game of, like, this is the nerd game of the year, honestly.
So if you had asked me, okay, so I think this is the side of the ball that we're both more interested in. If you had asked me, I don't know, in mid-September, if they were playing this game mid-September, I would have thought, yeah, Sean McVay is going to take his lunch this time because the Eagles defense, I thought, just wasn't ready. They looked different. They were still young. They hadn't made some of the personnel changes. DeJean wasn't playing. Buddy,
Mm.
they are shaping up. I mean, first of all the if you kind of break it up by like the things that McVay motion, less play action, but the types of runs that he calls, they rank well against all of it. I was watching them last week against the Commanders, thinking about this game that lay ahead, and watching how well the secondary communicated, passed things off, how prepared they were for everything that Washington threw at them. This actually goes back to what we were talking about with the bunches, the way that they were handling Washington's bunches. So impressive. This offense, so as you alluded
Mhm.
to, very different how they get into those bunches and stacks, and it's a lot trickier because McVay is this is why, like, I could tell you that, oh, the Eagles defense is 30 EPA per play versus offenses that use motion. But the way that McVay uses motion is so different from like a Cliff Kingsbury offense that those numbers aren't actually that meaningful. He is so masterful when everything's clicking and everyone's healthy at finding ways to manipulate defensive rules and create leverage for his receivers who thrive off of that. This is a unique challenge. I know that the Rams offense hasn't been perfect. Stafford has been far from perfect, particularly when he's pressured. But this is a different challenge for this Eagles defense. I cannot wait to watch this prize fight.
And another note on that motion is McVay is going to use it to force certain matchups, right? Because it's not that the Fangio defense is super complicated in terms of the number of different coverages they call. It's complicated in the sense that they're very flexible in terms of how they can get in and out of those coverages based on if it's a 2-by-2 look, a 3-by-1 look, what are the splits of the receivers, right? And Sean McVay, being Sean McVay, has obviously studied, okay, what are the tendencies in terms of the types of coverages they're in, whether it's quarters, half quarter quarter, or quarter quarter half, because they call man, but like not as much, right? It's like, okay, what are the triggers to get them into these certain coverages? And so then how do I use motion to get into those triggers as late in the process as possible so that these young DBs don't know what to do? That is going to be the battle, right? It's how Quignon and DeJean and these safeties, as well as old man Slay, who's still playing great this year, how do they communicate getting into the correct coverage against the exact look that they want to be in, if it's happening right now, right? And it's tough, but at the same time, they've been so good at it this year that I kind of think they can, which then is going to force McVay into, okay, how do we adjust?
Yeah.
How do we
Well,
come back in the third quarter and figure this out?
I think the run game is really interesting for me because LA has not been as good running the football this year as they were last year, and the Eagles front has been vastly improved. And I'm really interested
Mhm.
in that matchup on the inside. The Rams signed Jonah Jackson. He really struggled against Miami coming back. They went back to Bo Limmer, saw improvement against, a very bad defensive Patriots defensive front. Jalen Carter, right? Can you wreck this game from the inside the way you did
Ooh.
last week? Because all the stuff we're talking about, all the, like none of it's going to matter if Jalen Carter is in the backfield 2.0 seconds, right? So I think that there's the schematic matchup, which is really interesting, but I also think like this Eagles defense is so improved from a personnel standpoint and the way that so many of these young players are playing at all three levels. I end up I think the Rams are going to get theirs. I think like it's just too hard to stop when those guys are healthy and Puka Nakua in particular. But I do think if the Eagles can win a few drives, and I think they're capable of that, they have too much of an advantage on the other side of the ball for me to pick LA in this one.
And people forget what Akeem Hicks had in terms of impact on that 2018 game. Like the game plan worked because they had Akeem Hicks. Jalen Carter's the new Akeem Hicks for Vic, right? Like he is so. If we talk about force multipliers, like
Agreed.
he's the force multiplier in this defense. And I don't think the Rams have anybody that can block him at all. And when push comes to shove, if we know Vic, he's going to force you to block this guy one-on-one because he knows you can't. And if that's what it comes down to, and he's getting you into 2nd and 11 consistently because he knows you can't block him, that's game, set, match.
Eagles, right? Eagles? Eagles?
I'm I'm going to go Eagles, but at the same
Yeah.
time, like how many games have we seen like the Rams win that they absolutely should not have won because
I'm
of
not
Sean
well,
McVay?
I'm also really interested in like Jared Verse has been putting up really great numbers, but a lot of those numbers have come against inferior competition.
Yeah.
And here comes Lane Johnson and Mailata. So I think that's a really fun matchup. I'm really excited to watch that. I just think that the Eagles run offense has too many answers for this young defense. It's gonna be a good game though. All right, Ravens Chargers, the Harbaugh Bowl. You are talking about the Ravens side of this, and you're wearing a Charger shirt, which is funny. I'm gonna focus on the Chargers. I wrote, just let Herbert cook, right? Like, which
Yeah.
they have been letting happen. I mean, that he has the second highest percentage of throws over 20 yards of any quarterback in the NFL right now. It is deeply funny to me that they brought in Greg Roman, and there was this perception that they were not only going to never let him throw, but it was going to be a dominant run game. And the reverse is true. It's not a dominant run game. They break off a few explosives here and there, but it's a very inefficient rushing attack. However, one, Herbert himself is a very good runner. We could talk about that. But he's also pushing the ball downfield against a Ravens defense that we know has really struggled all year long. I do think that the Ravens personnel changes in terms of going to Hamilton and Washington at safety certainly seemed to help last week. But there's going to be opportunities to be had down the field, and they've got a quarterback who has an absolute, you know, javelin launcher. I don't know. I'm trying to think of something other than missile
Got a
launcher.
trebuchet attached to his shoulder. Yeah.
Yeah. So, Chargers also, unsurprisingly, getting the fourth most EPA per play out of the slot of any team in the NFL. It's a Lad McConkey stat. The Ravens have been giving up the fourth most EPA per play in the slot. I do think, given the matchup, they might play Humphrey almost exclusively, and I'll be curious to see how they deploy him. But yeah, I mean, Herbert just let that thing fly.
This is a very interesting matchup for the Ravens defense, right? Because on one hand, the Chargers don't necessarily have a vertical threat down the boundary. I mean, they keep trying to make QJ work, and unless the coverage is busted, it's not really working. Like I was in the stands for the Cincinnati game, and I can't tell you how many times the ball was in the air going towards QJ, and the fans were like, "Please God, no!" And most of the time, it was incomplete. Um, but at the same time, the Ravens' corners are really, really bad against go balls down the boundary, like the worst in the entire NFL in terms of touchdowns given up on targets, 20 plus yards down the field and outside the numbers. That's basically a Brandon Stevens stat to me. So it's kind of, again, an unstoppable or stoppable force meets movable object
Yeah.
in terms of the outside matchup. The inside matchup, Ladd versus Marlin, is going to be really, really interesting to me because Ladd, believe it or not, third most yards for any rookie pass catcher this year. So he's been a really good pickup for them.
And for me in fantasy. Whoo,
And for
carrying
you in
carrying me
fantasy.
all the way. Love Lad.
But you can't cover him for a long period of time, right? Because he's so shifty. And unfortunately, I think these Chargers tackles are going to give Herbert a lot of time to work with. The combination of Slater and Alt is fourth best in the NFL in terms of pressure percentage allowed. And the Ravens edge rush group is 22nd in terms of pressure rate. So again, I just don't really like this matchup for the Ravens. If they win, it's going to be, a typical Lamar game where he just completely takes it over. But good luck taking it over against Jesse Minner. Like,
Can I
Joe
ask
Burrow did everything he
I
could
was
and they
gonna
still
ask, like,
lost.
what is there anything you saw in the Bengals on the other side of the ball? Is there anything you because the Bengals offense obviously put up a lot of points on LA
Mhm.
most of the season, and, as good as this defense has been, they have not faced the most daunting slate of quarterbacks. So to see them suddenly face a truly elite quarterback and for him to have the success he did in the second half didn't make me think, "Oh, this defense isn't good." I still think they're very good. But is there anything you saw on tape in that game that you think perhaps Baltimore could similarly exploit?
It's interesting because the Chargers defense going into last week was top three in pretty much every single category that mattered, right? Especially points. And they were made up of a bunch of guys in the secondary that not a lot of people pay attention to outside of Derwin James, right?
Stills, can't yeah,
Tariq Still,
can't
Christian
have yeah.
Fulton, it was like a no-name secondary outside of Derwin. But they were playing extraordinarily well. And this was a defense that didn't blitz a whole lot, not a whole lot of simulated pressures. We're going to try to win with four, and we're just going to play really sound, disciplined coverage on the back end, make you march down the field with 10 to 12 play drives. And we don't think you can do it 10 to 12 times in a row. And for the most part, they were right. And then they encountered Cincy, where you have Joe Burrow back there with unreal pocket presence that was just getting out of sacks like crazy. Like, I have no idea how he got out of some of that stuff.
You know who
And
else is
all of a
good at
sudden
that?
your he's so good.
I was gonna say,
And then your DBs had to cover.
this fella who's coming to town, he's also pretty good at that exact thing.
That's what scares me about it, right? Is you have a second quarterback in a row that is really good at avoiding pressure, and he's going to make these DBs cover longer than they're typically having to.
The other thing that I'm interested in seeing also beyond that, which you talked about, is Chargers play with the highest light box rate in the NFL.
Mm-hmm.
Bengals can't run the ball, so whatever.
Yeah. Ooh. Yeah. Don't do that against Patrick Ricard.
So I wonder if there's like also the factor of like they might have to change their usual approach in this game. I mean, listen, Puna Ford, Diane Henley, these guys are playing amazing, but again, this Ravens team is a very different animal in terms of I keep using that phrase, different animal, but they're very different in terms of trying to defend this run with lighter bodies. And I do wonder if their unique stuff because I thought Pittsburgh, I was like, ooh, this is actually a tough matchup for Baltimore. Pittsburgh defense matches up really well with them. I'm not so sure this Chargers defense matches up well with Baltimore given their style.
The only way, not the only way, the main way I think the Chargers defense can hold firm here is if Deion Henley has an unbelievable game, specifically handling Lamar in space.
Yeah.
Because the Steelers defense is the best in the NFL in terms of corralling quarterbacks running. And the Chargers defense, they failed repeatedly to get Burrow on the ground. He extended plays. He made these DBs cover longer than they wanted to against Jamar and T, and they couldn't do that. And he just kept extending drives. Like, they need Deion to play out of his mind and make it so that Lamar, like, even if he escapes, he doesn't escape for long and certainly doesn't rip off those explosives. That's kind of the key matchup for me is Henley versus Lamar. Which, I mean, Henley's really athletic,
He's
but
playing well.
Lamar
He's playing really
is
well.
Lamar's a
Yeah.
different kind of athlete.
I'm picking the Ravens, I think, especially after the loss last week. And don't love the fact that they can't make field goals in what I anticipate being a close game.
Oh,
But, I know I can't even talk about that without getting choked up. But, I just think I think this I don't think one other thing about the defense that we didn't get to is while the pass rush, I think is the edge rusher, pardon me, they might be outmatched. I think on the interior, they actually have a matchup advantage, and I think there's an opportunity there for Madubuike, Jones. Roquan Smith is hurt, something to monitor.
mhm.
But I don't know. I feel like this is a Lamar bounce back game in a big, big moment. What do you think? You can pick Chargers.
I am gonna pick Chargers. It doesn't
Let's
mean I gotta
go.
feel super
It's
confident
close.
in
It's
it.
close. I mean, they both just barely beat Cincinnati.
Yeah.
This is a close one. It's a
They
good
both
one.
barely lost to KC.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's it for this week. You guys check out Brett's show. It's just youtube.com/at bootlegfootball, correct?
Yes, correct.
Okay. You guys should check that out. It's a great show, great YouTube channel. If you could watch this show on YouTube as well, if you are listening to it in podcast form. Thank you, as always, to everyone at Omaha Productions who works on this show: Kirsten Sebecki, Anthony Jimenez, Owen Saylor, Jack Foster, Tucker Tashjian. And otherwise, I will be back next week to recap what should be, hopefully, an amazing Monday night game with Dominique Foxworth.